All right. Okay, guys, so what we're doing today, session number 2, the official focus is front desk and all the things that tend to happen at the front desk. And then we'll just kind of go from there and see if we have any specific questions that come out from today. So you all should be looking at the screen right now, and it's a scheduler. And I've kind of entered a few fake patients with different scenarios and situations on that scheduler. And we're going to go through kind of what I would take a brand new clinic through Practice Perfect on this topic. So typically what we focus a lot on, of course, is the schedule itself. So when you click on the word schedule, depending on your username and password, you can sometimes change the default or the view that the scheduler takes you to. And I'll take you to those behind the scenes things just in case you don't know where they're coming from. So housekeeping is basically where you have control over where all of your setup comes from. So an example would be in housekeeping contacts, that's where you enter all of your list of providers. And then you enter the providers into the scheduler area into something called scheduled providers. And there is lots of other options that you can add for the scheduler. You can set up groups, you can set up equipment, you can set up rooms, you can set up individual providers. So my focus today is just working with the list of providers that I've set up, just myself at my clinic. And when you double click or when you're setting up that provider, the first option here called minimum appointment duration decides how long the appointment will be scheduled for if we don't give it any other information. So in my case, it's going to be a 60-minute appointment unless we say otherwise. Maximum occupancy means how many appointments are we limited to when we're going to schedule at the same time. So how many appointments could I book at 9 o'clock with this therapist? And then below are the days of the weeks and the hours in a perfect world that I want my therapist to be able to book. So you'll notice a couple of my days I start earlier, I end later. So start of the day and end of the day. The end time is actually the end of the last appointment. So not when you take the last appointment, but when it actually ends. Okay. And then outside of the perfect world, we have a second tab that you can set up on your therapist to use for special situations. We call that a special shift. So if you have a therapist, as an example, they don't usually work on Wednesdays, but you want them to be available to book on Wednesdays a few times throughout the year, you can tell the system, you can give it individual Wednesdays and tell them to be available from 8 to 4 or whatever, or you could tell the system a range of time and then make the therapist available for that range of time. Or you can even make them not available, take them right out of the scheduler. Okay, so every provider that you add into scheduled providers also has a special shift tab. Okay, and ultimately, those are what make the therapist or the rooms or the equipment show up on the scheduler view. And when you're in the scheduler view, the settings under Customize Schedule now pertain to a username and a password. So whenever you see setting options in the system, and those setting options are in a blue font as opposed to a black font, blue font is only applicable to the username and password that you're currently using. A black font, like this warning, a black font would affect every username and password. So down the left-hand side, we have lots of different options, different categories that you can choose from, and you can usually decide between the big things like whether we focus on one day at a time, all the time in the scheduler, or a week, whether we show canceled appointments on the screen or not, whether they hide themselves. Those are kind of some of the big ones. And when we log into the scheduler, what's the default, what's the starting point that we want the scheduler to go to? One therapist, all the therapists, one room, just my scheduler. You can kind of decide those types of things. Okay, so that's ultimately how you end up with something to look at in the scheduler. Once you get there, you can always change your view from there by using different toggles. So if you choose by provider, it shows you one day at a time, all the therapists across the top of the screen, or 1 week at a time, all the therapists across the top of the screen. Or if you choose one provider name, you always get the weekly scheduler. So it focuses just on that therapist name and then the whole week of that therapist. Okay, if you do have multiple locations, you can usually toggle between the different locations and between the different views, or that might be blocked out for you and you can just see your own location. Okay, so 3 different types of appointments we usually start talking about now, and that's usually your existing patient. Somebody on your list will want to book an appointment. That's what happens most often. Then you're going to have a brand new patient where we have no details and they want to book their first appointment, their initial assessment. And then we have time that we don't want to see patients. We call that blocking the scheduler. And those are usually things like lunches or meetings or time that you're out of the office and you don't want to see a patient. So we'll start with the existing patients on our list. Those are the easiest, the most common ones. And you always start the same way no matter what you're booking. So you always start with a date and a time and a therapist that has some available time to book. So you always start with date, time, therapist. Once you're there, you can do 2 different options if you're booking an existing patient. One of those options is a double click, just simply double click on your time slot, or you can use the green plus sign on the function bar. So double click or green plus click are the same things. From here, you're just starting at the top and you're working your way down. So the first thing you do need is the name of your patient. Start typing their last name, comma, first name. Scroll through the list as well as another option, but that patient has to be on the list to book this way. And then just start answering the questions as you move down. Is this the right incident or claim? Do we know the fee code we're going to be charging them on that day? Maybe we do, maybe we don't. Is this the right therapist? Is this the right time? Is there any note that we want to enter? And then the color. Is there a color that this patient should appear when I book them? Okay, so if we stopped at that point, it would be a one-time appointment. The second tab is used if the appointment is going to repeat itself or recur itself. So we might say something like, this patient books the same way every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and we just continue to do that until we say stop. Okay, if we don't use the second tab, it would just be a one-time appointment. The third tab is another option. If you have other therapists available to book, you could book them in the exact same appointment. Okay, and then okay when you're all set. So that's an existing patient. A brand new patient is very similar to that with one extra step. You have to add that patient into the system quickly first and then book them. A couple of ways to add that patient. You could leave the scheduler altogether, go to the left-hand side of the screen to the word clients and green plus sign to add your new client over there. Or if you prefer to stay in the scheduler, there is a little icon on the function bar as well to add a new client that way. And that collects basic information regarding your client. It's not the full profile. You do need things like name, you probably got a phone number, you probably do know the division or maybe the color you need to book them under, but you could collect a lot of that stuff afterwards as well. You do need the name to book them. Okay. Once you do say okay to that, I'm not going to do that, your patient would appear then with your other patients. So now to book them is just exactly the same as an existing patient. Date, time, therapist to start, do a double click or green plus click, find the patient in the system, follow the information down the screen. Maybe you book them a little bit longer. Maybe you have a color that represents they're a brand new patient. Maybe you have words that say they're a brand new patient on the booking, but it would be just like any other patient. Okay. The last type of appointment to schedule is a blocking, and you start exactly the same way, date, time, therapist, but instead of a double click or a green plus click, you use the function bar and you click on the block icon. A little play on words. So the block icon blocks the time. So typically for a block, you're recording why. Maybe we're not booking appointments. Don't book me here. I'm on lunch. I'm in a meeting. I'm on vacation. You record the amount of time. The color, probably not as interesting as patients, but you do have the same 2 options in the background for the tabs. They're the same, recurring tab and book with other provider tab. Okay. And then a block will appear on the screen. So no matter whether you're booking blockings, patients, brand new patients, you have the same options from there. You can always stretch the appointment, you can shrink it, you can pick it up and move it. You could do things like right-click the appointment, copy it, go somewhere else, right-click, paste it. Lots of different ways to move the appointments around. Okay. So the first thing you're starting to see on my screen is the color of the appointment. I've decided that the color is going to tell me what type of patient they are. So the color is your first visual. Then the next couple of visuals that you have are the blue sections of your screen. And they're at the top of the screen and at the bottom left of the screen. Okay, so at the top of the screen, it's always inherently, at first, financial. The financial information would usually indicate if there was a copay, maybe a deductible coinsurance, which insurance companies are going to be covering for this patient or paying for this patient. And there might also be some limits to that coverage. There might be an authorization, there might be a certain number of visits or an amount of money that we're authorized to bill for, and we're keeping an eye on that. So on my patient, I'm just going to hit the Enter button on my keyboard. And that's good to note. That's the fastest way to get into someone's profile. A lot of times you do want to do a double click when you're on that scheduler, but remember that books you an appointment. So Enter when you're on your patient brings you to the profile. And just a really quick review of the profile. The first series of tabs across the top in white, those are client information tabs. So we have things like client demographics, names, addresses, phone numbers, birth dates, genders, payment information, guardian details if applicable, extra contacts, till you get to the incident tab. And the incident tab is usually what describes the claim, how many different claims or incidents do they have, who's in charge, what therapist is looking after this file, what division, what color should they appear in the scheduler. And the incident will open up the sub-tabs of information. So remember, statistical information usually indicates things like date of loss, date of injury, diagnostic codes. Billing rules is one of the most important tabs. That's the connection to the insurance companies. If you indicate for the insurance companies or the third-party payers that there's a limit for funding, or maybe even a copay, coinsurance amount, that's what indicates the countdown message at the top of the screen. So when we tell the system in this case that they have 50 visits that they're approved for up until this date, the system will keep track of when those visits get used up and how many are left at all times. Okay, and then policy and claim information pertains to the billing rule. Now there is another tab in the background called the treatment plan tab. I'm not sure if a lot of you are familiar with this tab. It's relatively new. And this tab is not quite as intuitive as the one at the top of the screen where it's always in your face counting down the number of visits, but it also can do a countdown. You could record the individual details of your authorizations. Sometimes you have authorizations per fee code. You're allowed 20 of these codes and 30 of those codes. If you did record that type of information here, it would show up on this screen, and on the right-hand side, it would indicate how many of those appointments have been used. So if you said they were allowed 20 92507s, the system would tell you approved was 20 and they've used 4. But you do have to come to this screen. The billing rule is the only tab where it kind of shows intuitively at the top of the screen. Okay, so back to the scheduler, and I have set up a few different patients here in a few different ways. We're going to talk about those different ways of handling a copay. But typically, there are 4 different steps or processes that you want to learn today, and you want to learn how to implement them at your particular clinic. Now, one step further, I just want to point out 2 more things before we start talking about those steps, and they're the other visuals that are happening on the screen. So colors, of course, is your visual. The blue at the top of the screen and at the bottom left are visuals. We also have the font on the patient's name. So when the font is in the italic font, hopefully you can see my mouse right now on this pink appointment, italic font always means this is the last scheduled appointment for this patient. The regular font, if it's straight up and down, just a regular normal font, always means that there's future appointments. So in theory, you want to get all your italic appointments to book more, italic listed clients to book more appointments. The regular font, if you scoot down to the bottom left-hand side of the screen, that's the key information of that client that follows you around all the time at the bottom left-hand side. Things like a picture of your patient, their birth date, what therapist is in charge of that client, phone numbers to reach them at. One of the other things it shows is the future scheduled appointments that they have. So it's telling me right now this patient has 101 future scheduled appointments. The next one is on the 14th. So anytime you have a patient and their name is a normal looking font, it always means there's something scheduled in the future. Okay. If the bottom left is still not giving you as much information as you want, 101 is not enough information, knowing the appointments on the 14th is not enough, who's it with, what time is it scheduled, then you would use the little icon that looks like a calendar. It's called a find appointment icon. And that little guy is pretty good to note. You're probably going to use him quite a bit. Under find appointment, the fastest search is to be on the client that you're looking for and then scoot down to the bottom left and say pending. And that'll give you the list of all the future appointments. You could do tons of different searches. How many times has this guy canceled in the past 3 months? And then run a search on that. How many times has this guy no-showed? How many times have any of my patients no-showed in the past 6 months? So you can do lots of different searches, including a color search. How many pink appointments did I have this month? How many red appointments did I have 3 months ago? Okay, so lots of different great little searches you can do with the Find Appointments icon. I do have a question coming in for the left-hand side of the screen. Can we put the email address also listed over there on the left? The answer at the moment is no. There's not enough room for the email address to go over there, but it certainly is something I can ask for the development team, so I can work on that. My next question to you would be, which email address, or are you looking for both, or any email addresses that are listed on the file? So sometimes we have home, we have work, we have guardian. There's a number of them. If you can let me know your preferred one, I can certainly put that through to the development team for you for sure. Okay, so find appointments. Now the next little icon, or sorry, the next little visual for you are these icons, these little pictures that are starting to appear at the top of every appointment. So everybody looks the same if we look at the top right-hand side. They have a little hourglass, and then they're starting to change a little bit moving to the left. So the top right-hand side of every appointment, that symbol represents attendance. And everybody starts with a pending attendance. And then from there, you're going to change the status based on what happens. Some people go through a few different statuses before they complete. Okay, but that's a little symbol that you always change to reflect the appointment attendance. To the left of that, you might also have a little note icon. And that's if you wrote a little note during the booking of the appointment. You can also right-click on your appointment and add a note manually. When you're booking the appointment, remember you have your little notepad. And when you cancel or reschedule or even no-show an appointment, you do also get the prompt for a note. So we're going to do that on the screen right now. So on my green appointment, I'm going to mark the patient as a canceled appointment, and then I'm going to record from my list of options, which you can control in housekeeping. I'll select from my list, which automatically types a description for me, or I can type my own as well. Okay, and that appointment is now recorded as a cancel with a note. So whenever you see that little notepad, you just have to hover over top and it has something to show you. Okay, and I do have another person asking me on the left-hand side where it says the future appointments. It has a number and it has the date. It does actually depend on the version of the software that you have. It was an upgrade, I believe, in the last 3 to 6 months. So depending on the version of the software you have, you may want to upgrade to get a bunch of these new features too. Okay. Okay, back to the icons on the appointment. You might also notice a money bag on some of the appointments. And the money bag appears when the system thinks the patient has a responsibility for payment. So it's saying, get ready, if you can, you want to try to fill the money bag, you want to try to collect the money. So typical reasons why a patient would show a money bag are things like copays, coinsurances, deductibles. If we say they have no insurance, the system would think that it needs to show the money bag. We always need to collect money. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through a few different scenarios with our clients, and we're going to learn the 4-step process. Now, I teach the 4-step process, of course, in the following 1, 2, 3, 4 order. You may decide that order doesn't work for your clinic, or you do something different, and that's totally fine. You don't have to go through this order in the order that they teach you. You just have to know the individual steps and how they interplay with each other. Okay, so let's start up top here with my private paying patient. My green appointment at the top, and that means they have no insurance at all, private pay, self-pay. Okay. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do on my patient is change the attendance. That's step 1. That's usually the first thing we know. Now, I am going to do a rebook on this patient just to show what that is like, or what that does. So a canceled appointment, a no-show, a rebook are all statuses that mean this appointment is not going to happen. A rebook, its intention was to be not quite as bad as a cancel. So a rebook in theory means they're not going to be showing up for this appointment, probably the same reason as a cancel. They're sick, they're not able to attend, but rebook means they've rescheduled it to another time. So although they've canceled this one, it's not happening, they've replaced it with something in the future. A cancel usually just means they haven't really talked about anything in the future, but they're canceling this particular appointment. And a no-show is kind of worse. They just didn't call us, they didn't cancel, they didn't show up at all for their appointment. Some clinics implement charges for cancels, late cancels, no-shows, that kind of stuff. That's kind of why there's the 3 of them. They might charge somebody on a cancel, but not for a rebook, that kind of thing. Okay. Either way, the status of those 3 is an empty time slot. That means that appointment is not actually going to happen. So if somebody's canceled it, they're not actually going to be attending this appointment. That's technically an empty time slot. So the option for that in your settings is to keep the canceled appointments visually on the screen, but they're going to act like they're not there. So I could take another appointment. I'm just going to take this pink appointment here on my screen, and I'm going to slide it over top of that appointment, and that's called a double book. 2 things are now booked at my 8 o'clock time slot. My test private patient appointment who's canceled, they're not showing, and I've replaced it with this pink appointment. Okay. I'm going to slide that back. Another option is just book another appointment as if it's not there. Be on that time slot, green plus sign, find another patient, and book another appointment right over top of it. Okay. If you want to see what it looks like if you change your setting, the setting comes from Settings, Customize the Scheduler. It's under Miscellaneous, no, I lied, it's under Appointment Cell. And you might choose, I don't want to see the cancels on my screen. When I cancel or no-show or reschedule an appointment, rebook an appointment, I don't want to visually see them anymore. So if you untick that option and then say, okay, they should disappear from your screen. They're technically still there. You can still report on them, but they're not going to visually tie up that space on your screen. You can always pull them back when you're ready. Settings, Customize the Scheduler, Appointment Cell is the category, show them on my screen, and then they'll come back. Okay, so whether you visually choose to have them disappear or they stay there, just remember that they really are an open time slot. You can book another appointment in there. Okay, someone is asking automatically in the morning for some reason, the no-show attends as the time passes probably in your scheduler. Again, that is another setting. So under Customize Your Scheduler, under Appointment Cell, some of these say automatically change my appointment status with elapsed time. What that basically means is if I haven't told the system that this patient is here or canceled or no-showed and it's 8:15 and my appointment was at 8 o'clock, assume that's a cancel. Okay. So step one in your process is always attendance, usually first. In a perfect world, we want everyone to go through these two. They show up for their appointment, we do the list of things we need to do, and then we mark them as a completed appointment. In a perfect world, completed on every patient would mean everybody showed up, we did what we needed to do, everything is good. Okay. So step one on this patient, we're going to say he showed up. Now, he's a private paying patient. I know that because of his name, of course, and he's green, and he's booked with my PT. So at the front desk, I might be the person who's going to charge him for service. I charge everybody. I'm pretending I charge everybody who's a self-pay patient the exact same thing every time they show up. So step two in my process is the little white hand. And that little white hand is meant for charging treatments and assessment, charging the services that we rendered. In some clinics, step two is always the responsibility of the therapist. So that means you wouldn't do it at the front desk. Sometimes it's a shared responsibility. Sometimes at the front desk, we charge self-pay clients and copay clients their charges when they walk in the door, but the therapist enters the charges for everybody else. So that's the part you have to figure out what works best at your clinic. The act of hitting the hand, though, is step two in the process. So the little white hand records the services that were rendered. If you're in the scheduler while you're doing it, this is what it looks like. Start at the top, work your way down, pick your appropriate fee code, make sure you've got the right therapist name for treating versus billing. The billable therapist name is the name that shows up on the invoice. Typically, we want to see things like time and visits and units with an amount. You can change your amount if you have authority to do that too. On the top right-hand side of the screen, you look to see where the charge is going, who's receiving the responsibility of the charge. For self-pay clients, there's literally nowhere else for it to go. They have no third party, so the charge should always be to their responsibility. Okay, so just have a look at the screen, see if you need to add any more information, modifiers, diagnostic codes if that's required, but you have to add this to the patient screen when you're ready to do so. If there is something that the system still needs from you, what you're seeing on the screen right now is a requirement. It's saying my fee duration is a requirement. I can't let you add this until you enter that. So the system usually stops you. Okay. When you finally add it to their chart, you see it in the bottom section of the screen. Nothing is official until it makes it to the bottom section. Okay. If your step two in the process at your clinic was multiple fee codes, you would just repeat the process. You would say, I'm also charging my patient for this, and I want to add that to their chart too. Okay. When you're all done, you're going to hit the OK button to commit to that. And you should notice now on the appointment, there's a little white hand that has appeared. So step two in the process is going to the little white hand, choosing the charges and committing to it by adding it and saying OK. And eventually you should see a little white hand on the appointment. Now, if you have a situation where you charge the exact same thing over and over and over again, 98% of the time you're charging the same patient the same thing every time they come in, there's a faster way that you can go about that. It's called automating the charge or auto charging. A couple of things you have to do to set that up. One is a setting change. Back under Customize to Scheduler, you set the auto charge to reflect attendance. Meaning if the patient shows up, if he arrives, go ahead and charge. Or maybe it's just based it on completed, go ahead and charge. Or you could say either or. If they arrive or complete, as long as they show up, let's go ahead and charge. So that would be the first thing to do. The second thing is on a patient, if we hit the enter button in their profile, we would have to indicate which of the fee codes we want to charge them. And that's down here at the bottom left-hand side, the usual fee code. So you would attach a fee code to a patient, probably with a price, unless everybody gets the same price of the code. That indicator at the bottom of a usual fee code and price should reflect at the top of the screen as a little note so that you can see who has the usual fee code connected to them. And that follows them all the way through the scheduler. Okay, so the system will automatically charge the patient that code, that price, if this particular setting in your customized scheduler is turned on. And that setting is turned on per username and password, by the way. So a lot of times you turn that on for your administrative, your front desk team, not usually the therapist. Okay, and that would automate the step 2 process. Step 3 in the process is payment. Can we take a payment from this client? A couple of things are usually determined by that. Does the patient have a balance? Is there any money to exchange today? Do they want to give us money? So step 3 would normally pay for the service that we charge them for. We just confirm the details, who's paying, the date, how much they're actually paying, sometimes less, sometimes more, and then the method. Now, step 4 in the process is a separate icon. I'm just circling it right now with my mouse, that little envelope on the function bar. That is step 4, producing an invoice and a receipt. We've included step 4 in step 3. When you're taking the payment, we just assume you probably always want to give them an invoice and a receipt. So we include that option as a tick box. That is step 4. So right now in my scenario, I'm doing step 3 with a step 4. And if I say OK to commit to that, I can do a preview and just make sure it looks good. This is called a generic invoice and a receipt all in one. So it lists the dates of service we're paying for. The payment is included on here, so now it's a receipt at the same time. I can have a custom message entered through my settings area. And my next future appointment is a reminder here for my client as well. Okay, so when producing an invoice and a receipt all in one, we have to post it to commit to it. Posting is like saving. We can post print, get a hard copy, post email it to the client instead, or post only means save only to the screen. Nobody wants a copy, I'm just going to save it. Now, if we look back to the appointment, we've now done 4 steps in that process. 1 is attendance, 2 is a charge, 3 is a payment, 4 is a receipt or invoice. The little money bag is now full of money. It has a little money symbol inside the money bag. That's a perfect case scenario. It just simply means that we did collect money from our client today, not that we always will. Everybody doesn't always pay every single time. And the money bag being full of money doesn't mean they don't still have a balance. It just means we did collect money today. So if we go through internally now a little questionnaire for ourselves, what makes my patient complete? If this is the perfect case scenario and I want to get all my clients to complete, what does complete mean on a private pay client or a self-pay client? It might be something from a front desk perspective. It might be a list like they showed up, I charged them, I took their money, I asked them for money, I gave them a receipt, I asked them to book a future appointment. There's really nothing left on my list I could do. That would be a completed appointment. Okay. Now let's move on to this patient down here. I've set him up as if he's a full insurance, no copay, no deductible, no responsibility. He does not have a little money back. So if we talk about those 4 steps again, step 1, attendance. Step 2, you might at the front desk say, I don't know what codes to enter. My therapist is going to have to tell me the services that they rendered that client, so I can't enter a step 2. Step 3, there is no money to take. He doesn't owe me a copay, doesn't owe me a deductible or a coinsurance. There's no money to exchange hands. I'm not going to do step 3. Step 4, I'm probably not going to give them an invoice or receipt. We didn't exchange any money. There's really nothing to give them. But my list might be they showed up, I marked their attendance, I asked them to book a future appointment, had them to fill out their paperwork, they're all done. Okay, so it just depends on what that list is. Okay, so now let's get into copays. Copays are interesting. There's a couple of different ways to handle copays. So my first method for copay here is the method whereby we don't collect anything at the front desk. We're going to simulate that we have to have the therapist tell us all the services that were rendered, and then we're going to collect the copay after that's done. So step one would be attendance. We would still say the patient showed up. At the front desk, potentially we wouldn't know which of our fee codes to enter. So the therapist would have to enter their note, and I'm pretending I'm a therapist now, they would come along and they would enter a certain number of codes with units and duration that they provided the patient. That fee code that they're using has a price to it, so the system is going to split that responsibility between the patient and the insurance. So this particular method of handling a copay is called the split fee code method. And that means whoever's entering the fee code, maybe it is the front desk, maybe it's the therapist, but whoever is entering the codes that represent treatments and assessments that were rendered to the client, it's going to split the responsibility at that time. And then once these charges have been entered against the client, that's what indicates that the client has a balance at the top of the screen. So that we could now do a step 3, which is the payment, have the patient pay for their services, and we could provide step 4, an invoice and a receipt as well. And what that receipt would look like to the client would be the full amount of the charge was the total fee amount. Your portion of it is the copay amount. And then however much they paid, that's on the receipt part. Okay. So I'm going to do post only. So that is called a split code method, split fee code method. The other method is called a credit method. And this is whereby the flow of how things happen is the client shows up, checks in at the front desk right away before they even have their treatment, and they want to give you money. So typically the flow would be step 1, patient arrive for their appointment. Step 2, you would say, I can't charge them for any services. I don't know what the therapist is going to do. They're going to enter that part later. But the patient wants to give me money. Step 3, we would record a payment. The payment would be recorded exactly how they're giving us the money, the date, the method, the amount, and you would typically write a note at this point to say what that amount is for. You would not be able to do a step 4. There would not be any invoice for services that we could provide them. We couldn't really tell them what this money is going to pay for, what service code specifically it's going to pay for. So instead, on the left, we would choose don't apply it to anything specific yet, and maybe we'll produce them a simple receipt, a thanks for your payment receipt. And if we say okay, a simple receipt is in fact that. It can't really explain that the $60 is specifically for a CPT code. It can just acknowledge the payment and say, thank you, we acknowledge this is for your copay. We'll give you something a little bit more detailed later after we bill insurance. Okay. And then we would print that out for the client. Okay. Another option for handling a fee copay, is by charging a fee code, and it's called the fee code method. So this is a special little code that's been set up in the background under housekeeping financial fee codes, the list of all your services that you charge patients for. And it's a special little code. Doesn't really matter what you call it, but the code has been set up in a way that it only charges a patient responsibility. It also does not count as a visit. It's not the actual treatment or assessment. So how that works in a setting through the scheduler, through the 1, 2, 3, 4 process, is step 1, patient shows up for their appointment. Step 2, can we charge them for anything? Yes. The charge is the copay charge. That's all that we would know at the front desk is how much to charge them towards their copay. So whatever that code is that we called, in my case it's called Copayment, client responsibility. It's been set up to charge $20. I could say $30 on this patient or $40, whatever the situation is. But it's also been set up that it's not counting towards a visit. On the right-hand side, even though they have insurance, the copay is charging the client directly. This is not a code that will ever go out or bill to insurance. Okay, I add that officially to the patient's chart, and that's all I would know at the front desk, so I'm done. Now that is a process that could be automated because we can connect the patient to the fee code called copay in the amount of this patient's copay, and we could turn on that setting we talked about earlier under customize the schedule, where we could tell the system to just automatically charge that based on attendance. Every time they show up, charge that copay $20. Okay. Now the little white hand would not appear on the appointment. That's on purpose. It's not a treatment. It's not assessment we've charged them for. We've only charged them for the copay. But that copay keeps increasing their balance until they pay that balance, which means step 3 could be a possibility. They have a money bag on their appointment. Step 3, the payment could happen. I could take their money. I could say how much. I can produce them an invoice and a receipt. I'm paying for a charge. I'm paying for a little white hand. The invoice and the receipt would tell the patient all the copays I've charged them for and what they're paying. Okay, and I would print it, email it, or post it. That fills the money bag with money, and I would ask myself, what is my checklist? They showed up, I charged them their copay, they paid it, they didn't pay it, I took their money, I gave them a receipt, I asked them to book a future appointment, I'm all done. Therapist still has to come along, write their note, tell me what they did. Okay. So those are kind of the 3 major ways to handle a copay. You don't typically mix those methods within the clinic. You want to pick the one that works the best for you and then be consistent about how you roll out a copay. And there is a 4th method. It's not very popular. Don't do anything. Bill it out to insurance and then deal with it when insurance pays you. But that one isn't any different setup in the system. It's just that most people don't do that, obviously, because you're getting your money after the fact. Okay. So as you go through the process, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 on all your patients, and you may decide 1, 3, 2, 4 works better for me, or 1, 2, 4, 3 works better for me. But as you go through that process on all your clients, at the end of the day, you start to see a little trend. Hopefully 90% of your patients or more have little check marks. Hopefully everybody has little hands. Hopefully everybody has little money bags full of money. So when the patients don't look like that, they start to stand out a little bit. So we call it balancing your day. You just have to decide when your day should be balanced. So what I mean by that is if you give your therapist 24 hours to do their notes and get all their charges in, then balancing today at 5 o'clock doesn't seem reasonable, right? All the stuff's not going to be entered. So if you give everybody 24 hours to get all their notes in, all their charges in, and everything should be done within 24 hours, that means today, Wednesday, May the 13th, I would balance for Tuesday, May the 12th. Okay? So the first process in the balance is looking at your schedule. See if you can see anything that doesn't look right. You might look over here on Tuesday and be like, what happened to these guys? Why are they still pending? Why is there no attendance? Why is there no bag full of money? Where's the hand? So you might visually catch it. And then if visually you think it looks good, the next step is to go to the reports. You want to run 2 reports for every day. So reports is the drop down, operation is the section, and the first one that you start with is daily reconciliation. That's the first one. And you run it for the time range that you're trying to balance. It could be a single day, yesterday, 2 days ago, whatever range you want to put in there. If you have multiple locations, you can run this as a combined report, show me all locations combined together, or pick the one you want to work with. Okay? And that preview summarizes 5 different reports, all summing up into one. So the first little summary at the top, called a revenue summary, that is the little white hands. It's counting all those little white hands that have been used. And it's saying, I'm going to run this including today's stuff here, and it shows you, it counts them. It says you did 10 of those, 4 of those, 2 of those, 20 of those, and it's giving you a summary at the end of how many units, visits, items, and duration that you charged for. That summary, in theory, should balance against your scheduler. So if it says you've charged for 4 visits, then we should have 4 people attending in the scheduler. And that's your next summary, provider attendance summary. So that is counting for all the therapists that have appointments. It's saying, hey, Heather, you had 10 cancels, 4 no-shows, 3 attends, 4 people rebooked. It's counting all those changes. And we should never have pending. If I'm balancing for a date range that's over, in theory, we should never have an I don't know if they showed up status. We should always have them listed as a cancel, a no-show, a show-up, which means my numbers of attended should equal the number of visits I've charged for. So right away, I probably know that I'm out. I probably know that I'm not quite balanced. I have more people attending than I do charges. The next summary is your payment summary. It's looking at all your cash, Visa, MasterCard, American Express. That should probably balance against your Visa machine, against the cash you have on hand. And then the last summary is typically why we really run this report all the time, the billing reconciliation. That's the section, in theory, we never want to see. So the first part isn't that bad. It's saying, hey, the following patients attended, but they have a balance that they didn't pay for. That's just the nature of the beast. You are going to have patients who have a balance that didn't pay it off in that day. If your balances are high, maybe that's a little bit of a red flag, but a normal small balance like this is pretty normal. That kind of stuff happens. The last part of the report is typically what we really don't want to see. This is saying the following patients, I think, are missing their charges. So these people have appointments. They do not appear to have canceled or no-showed or rebooked, but they also don't seem to have a little white hand yet on their appointment, a charge for some kind of treatment or an assessment. So it's saying, heads up, I think you might have missed something. So those would be visually all the people in the scheduler who don't look like they've canceled or no-showed and also don't have a little hand next to their name. If that patient shows up on this report and they have a little star next to their name, like that one there in the middle, that means we did charge them something. We did go to the hand. We did do a step 2, but whatever it is that we charged them for appears to not be a treatment or an assessment. And that's usually what happens when you charge somebody for a copay, but the therapist hasn't come along yet and entered the treatments or assessments. So the system is saying, check that patient out, because I think you do have a charge, but it's still not for the visit. It's not for the assessment or the treatment. I think you're still missing the assessment or treatment. Okay. Once you determine that report and you go back to your schedule, be like, yep, therapist, can you please hurry up, get your notes in there, get all your charges in there. The next report that you would run, and you could be a biller at this point too, running this report. The next report is also under operations, and it's called your revenue report. And the revenue report, again, for the same range of time, I tick this little box that says show injury-related information. And that little box, this report, is basing everything on the little white hand. In fact, it's just the little white hands that this report is showing you. But now it's a detailed report. What you're looking for is almost like a little scrub before you're going to go and bill all this. What are the charges that we enter? What do they look like? And you're looking for things like, does the division of the client warrant the fee code that was used? Does the units match the time on the fee code? Have I entered 30 minutes but 5 units of a code or something that wouldn't be right? Is the price right? Do they have a diagnostic code if they need one? Do they have a modifier if they need one going to that insurance? So it's basically just showing you a very detailed list of all the little white hands that were entered, all the charges, all the treatments, assessments, things we sold, all the things that were entered with that little white hand icon, and you're looking for mistakes. Okay, so that in general is what I would typically take a brand new clinic through who was just learning the software, learning what to do at the front desk and how different things can be entered. And it's usually about the 4-step process, 1, 2, 3, 4, and how you implement that kind of thing at the clinic. Feel free to chat. I am getting through my little chats right now too. Feel free to chat if there's any questions that you have, anything specific that I didn't touch on today that you were really hoping that I would talk about. And let me know if you have any questions.
So I have a question about the information panel down at the bottom.
Yeah, at the bottom left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so where it says the eval due, where would you put that in? And then kind of a second part to that question.
Yeah.
Is that able to be counted rather than setting a specific date? Like we have Medicare patients that we do a reeval every 10 visits. Is there a way to set it by visits in case they cancel?
I see what you're saying. So let's go through that. So I'm going to hit the enter button on my keyboard and just show you where that comes from. So it's on the incident tab and then the statistic tab, and it's this particular field here. So the quick answer is no. That field cannot turn into a visit count. The only places that can turn into a visit count really is the billing rule tab. So you could change your billing rule and have it notify you every 10th visit that there's an eval or a reeval that's due. Otherwise, this particular field is only by the date, and that date does show up at the bottom left, and you can run a report on that date as well. It's a task and clinical report, and it's the second one here, physician and evaluation tracking. You could say, show me all my patients who have next eval due date in the month of whatever, May, by provider, whatever, and then run the report based on that. But unfortunately, this particular field, no, it cannot be done like a certain number of visits. Only the billing rule tab can do that for now.
Okay, and is there a place on there, like how would I put that so that it would kind of remind me at a certain amount of visits?
Yes, so keep in mind that your visit count is an accumulative number. So when we go through this little scenario here, if you have the 10th remind you and you want to remind on another 10, then your number would be 20, and then another 10 would be 30, and then another 10 would be 40. So if you put the number here, that number counts at the top of the screen. So it kind of counts down and it tells you how many more visits you have left or how many you've used. And then your action would be to continue charging the same payer. You just want a warning at that point. You're not saying stop the funding. You're just saying I want a warning when I hit that limit so that I can do something. And your something would be an eval or a reeval or whatever.
Okay, and then like after the 10 visits, then I'd go in and set it to 20 so it would remind me in the next 10. Okay, yeah, I got you. Exactly. Okay.
Okay. Now that whole 10 visit Medicare thing kind of went away during the time that we had MIPS and the PQRS reporting, right? Because it was the functional reporting that overtook the reassessment thing. But now that a lot of clinics are not providing those statistics back to Medicare, I think what you're saying, the 10th visit reassessment thing has started up again.
Well, we just kind of decided as a company just to continue. We thought that was a good way to just kind of reassess where we're at. So
I see what you're saying.
We're just continuing to do evals
so
every.
It's more of like
visit.
An internal. I gotcha.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm going to ask development about that to see if there's something different that they're thinking about or they've already got on the works for that kind of count. At the moment, I will tell you that clinics kind of guess it and they say, okay, well, 10 visits is going to lead me into month 2, so we're going to put a due date in month 2. That's typically how they would do it. That or the billing rules tab.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, if you are able to talk to development about that, even if there's just a way to like set a reminder every so many visits, because we also have like we use Care Connections every 5 visits.
Yep. Same kind of
So
thing. You
just
need a visit count for that.
yeah, just if it's could be a reminder, because when we set a date, then like I said, if someone cancels, then that date's not
Right.
really accurate anymore.
Right. Right. For sure. I'll follow up for that for sure. Can you, I'm not sure who is speaking, so can you shoot me an email
Yeah. Yep.
and then I can get back to you on that for sure.
Yep. I can do that. Thank you.
Awesome. Any other questions, guys?
Yeah, when you pulled up the revenue report, you said
Yeah.
you clicked on something before you previewed it. Can you tell me what that was? I missed that part.
I certainly can. I'm going to see if I can highlight it. I'm just using a little pointer here. I don't know if you can see a red highlighter on the screen.
Yes.
It's a little option. It says show injury related information, and that will show you all your ICD-10 codes and your modifiers that have been entered against a treatment code.
Okay, so this may seem like a silly question, but why is it called injury related? That throws me off.
Oh, for sure. So injury related, I think it's coming from because your ICD-10 codes are called injury and diagnostic codes. So I think that's
sure.
I think that's just the terminology that they choose to put in there.
Okay.
So these ICD-10 codes are why.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, guys. So if there's no other questions, or feel free to shout out if there are more questions, but if you think about stuff after the fact and you didn't get a chance to answer or to ask your question, sorry, just shoot me or Michelle questions along the way anytime you want for sure. And I'll show you a couple of places to keep an eye out as well if you need some help. So one of them is under your help menu, help and about. Help and about, if you remember that, it's always how you get some good contact information. So there is always the email address to reach our support department there. And if you replace the first part of that with the word Heather, it'll come to me. Michelle will go directly to Michelle. Or if you're not sure where it should go, send it to support and it'll get to where it needs to go. The other link is this link called the university or the learning site link. I don't know if any of you have been in there or seen that link before in the past. It's just a link to our website, and on our website we have a US and a Canadian version, but it's all the training videos pretty much on how to do everything in the system. If you're interested in how do I document with the SOAP note, how do I make a SOAP note, how do I enter a patient, how do I change the color of my scheduler, there's like a little video that you can watch that kind of walks you through all that. There is a whole section here at the bottom called webinars, which is what we're doing today. And this session is taped, so it will be loaded up here in a couple of days. But all of these sections below called Continuing Education with Heather, that is a series of these particular sessions, and they're taped and then they get loaded in this section probably in about 2 or 3 days. So if you don't get a notification specifically from Michelle, it just might be because she doesn't have your direct email or something. So just remember, you can always look for that. You can share those links with anyone. And to get there, when you're logged in, it's help, about, and then it's the Learning Center or the university link. Okay. Okay, guys, that is the end of our session. Thank you so much for attending. We do have a whole series of these happening every second Wednesday, I believe, for the next couple of months. So feel free to sign up for any other topic that you'd like to take a part in. And in a minute, you'll see the session end on the screen. So let us know how you're doing. Good luck, everyone.